she's with me." 3 words. That was all it took to shatter the perfectly curated life of Seraphina Wellington. One moment, she was the billion-dollar heiress trapped in a corner by a man she despised. The next, a stranger with sawdust on his boots and a voice like gravel stepped out of the shadows and claimed her. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He was a single dad who had nothing to lose, and he was about to start a war with the most powerful family in New York. But the real twist? He didn't save her by accident. He had been watching her family for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This is the story of how a lie became love, and how the past always comes back to haunt you. The air inside the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel didn't smell like food or perfume. It smelled like old money and quiet desperation. Seraphina Wellington stood near the ice sculpture, clutching a flute of champagne so tightly her knuckles were white. At 28, she was the crown jewel of the Wellington Hotel Group. Her face was plastered on Forbes covers, her style imitated by influencers from Soho to Paris, and her future was currently being auctioned off by her father, Arthur Wellington, to the highest bidder. That bidder was Preston Calloway. Preston was currently leaning in too close, his breath smelling of scotch and entitlement. He was the heir to a shipping empire, handsome in a way that looked manufactured, like a Ken doll left out in the sun too long. "You're being difficult, Sarah," Preston hissed, his hand sliding up her bare arm. It wasn't a caress. It was a clamp. "Your father and I have already discussed the merger. The engagement announcement is happening at 10 o'clock. Stop looking like you're at a funeral." "It is a funeral, Preston," Seraphina said, her voice low and icy. She tried to pull her arm away, but his grip tightened. "It's the funeral of my autonomy. Let go of me." "Don't cause a scene," Preston sneered, his veneer of charm cracking. The room was filled with senators, tech moguls, and the vultures of high society. "You think you have a choice? You're a Wellington. You do what is good for the stock price. Now smile and walk with me to the stage." I said, "Let go." Preston yanked her closer, hidden by the bulk of a large floral arrangement. "You're hurting my pride, Sarah, and you know I get nasty when my pride hurts." Seraphina's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked around. Her father was across the room, laughing with the mayor. No one was looking. No one cared. In this world, silence was the ultimate currency. She braced herself to scream, to create the scandal her father feared most when a shadow fell over them. It wasn't a shadow cast by a waiter or a guest. It was a looming, solid presence that blocked out the chandelier light. "You heard the lady," a voice said. It wasn't loud, it wasn't shouted. It was spoken with the terrifying calm of a man who has seen things that would make Preston Calloway wet his silk trousers. Preston spun around, annoyed. "Excuse me, do you know who I—" Preston froze. The man standing there didn't belong. He was wearing a tuxedo, but it fit him poorly across the shoulders, straining against muscles that were built, not bought at a gym. His hair was dark, slightly unkempt. His hands, hanging loose by his sides, were rough, calloused and scarred. There was a faint smudge of grease on his jawline. He looked like a wolf that had wandered into a poodle show. "I don't care who you are," the stranger said. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and focused entirely on Preston's hand gripping Seraphina's arm. "I care that you're touching her when she asked you not to. Let go." Preston laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Security. Who is this clown? Is this one of the hired help?" The stranger didn't blink. He took one step forward, just one. But the violence radiating off him was so potent that Preston instinctively released Seraphina and stumbled back, knocking into a waiter carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Silverware clattered. The room went silent. Arthur Wellington turned, his eyes narrowing as he saw the commotion. He began to march over, his face thunderous. "Sarah!" Preston sputtered, adjusting his jacket, trying to regain dignity. "Tell this mechanic to back off before I have him arrested." Serafina looked at the stranger. He wasn't looking at Preston anymore. He was looking at her. There was a strange recognition in his eyes, a depth of sadness she couldn't place. For a second, the suffocation of her life vanished. "Who are you?" Preston demanded again. "Do you have any idea who she is?" "She's my fiancée." The stranger looked at Preston, then back to Serafina. He didn't hesitate. He didn't stutter. "She's with me." The lie hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Arthur Wellington arrived at that moment, flanked by 2 security guards. "What is the meaning of this?" Arthur barked. He looked at the stranger with disdain. "Caleb, what are you doing out here? You're supposed to be fixing the rigging for the stage curtain, not harassing the guests." Caleb. His name was Caleb. "I'm finished with the rigging," Caleb said, his voice flat. He didn't cower before Arthur Wellington, which was shocking in itself. "And I wasn't harassing a guest, I was stopping an assault." "Assault?" Preston scoffed. "It's a lover's quarrel, but this, nobody claims she's with him." Arthur looked at his daughter. "Serafina, explain. Who is this man to you?" This was the cliff edge. Serafina could tell the truth, that Caleb was just the carpenter hired to fix the stage, and be forced back to Preston. Or she could jump. She looked at Caleb. He didn't look worried. He looked ready to take the fall for her. He held out a hand, large, rough, and steady. Serafina took it. "He's telling the truth, Father," Serafina lied, her voice projecting across the silent ballroom. "I'm not marrying Preston, because I'm with Caleb." The room erupted in gasps. Preston turned a shade of purple, usually reserved for bruised fruit. Caleb didn't smile. He just squeezed her hand, a grounding force in the chaos. "We're leaving," Caleb said to Arthur. "You walk out those doors, Serafina," Arthur warned, his voice shaking with rage, "and you leave the trust fund, the company, and the name behind." Serafina looked at the cold gold and marble of the ballroom, then at the warm, calloused hand holding hers. "Watch me," she whispered. Caleb pulled her through the crowd, past the stunned socialites, past the furious Preston, and out into the cool, biting air of the New York night. They didn't stop walking until they were 6 blocks away. Serafina's heels clicked rapidly on the pavement, struggling to keep up with Caleb's long strides. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the freezing reality of what she had just done. She stopped abruptly near a subway entrance. Okay. Stop." Caleb stopped and turned. Under the streetlights, he looked even rougher. The cheap tuxedo jacket was open, revealing a white shirt stained with sweat. He looked tired. Not sleepy tired, but soul tired. "You okay?" he asked. "Am I okay?" Serafina let out a hysterical laugh. "I just publicly humiliated Preston Calloway and disowned myself in front of half of Manhattan. No, I am not okay." "And who are you? Why did you do that?" Caleb sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Name's Caleb Sterling. I was hired to fix the hydraulic lift for your father's presentation stage. I was packing up my tools when I saw that guy grabbing you. I have a low tolerance for bullies." Serafina studied him. "You risked your job. I'll find another job. There's always things that need fixing." "You don't understand," she said, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. "My father will blacklist you. You won't work in this city again." Caleb shrugged. "It wouldn't be the first time Arthur Wellington ruined my life." He said it so quietly she almost missed it. What does that mean? Caleb checked a cheap digital watch on his wrist. Look, Miss Wellington, I need to get going. I have to pick up my kid from the babysitter in 40 minutes, and I'm all the way uptown. You have a child? Yeah, Leo. He's 6. Caleb's expression softened for the first time. The hard lines around his eyes crinkled. And if I'm late, Mrs. Higgins charges me double. So, are you going to be okay getting home? Or do you have no home to go to anymore? Serafina realized with a jolt that she couldn't go back to her penthouse. Her father owned the building. The doorman would likely already have instructions to bar her entry. She had her purse, her phone, and the dress on her back. She faltered. The billionaire heiress, homeless in 10 minutes. Caleb watched her, assessing the situation. He groaned, a deep rumble in his chest. You can't stay on the street. Come on. Come on where? My truck. I'll drop you at a hotel. Or, well, I guess you probably don't have your credit cards if your dad is as fast as I remember. He probably froze them 5 minutes ago, she admitted. Right. Come on. He led her to a battered, rusting Ford F-150 parked in a loading zone. The passenger seat was cluttered with blueprints, a plastic dinosaur, and a bag of fast food wrappers. He swept them onto the floor. Sorry, the executive suite wasn't available. He deadpanned. As they drove toward Queens, the silence stretched. Serafina watched the city blur by. She should be terrified. She was in a stranger's truck, heading to God knows where, but the smell of sawdust and old coffee in the cab was strangely comforting. It smelled real. Why did you say that? She asked suddenly. Back there. She's with me. Why that specific lie? Caleb gripped the steering wheel tight. Because it was the only thing that would shut them up. Guys like Preston, they view women as property. If I just said, leave her alone, he'd argue. If I claimed you, in his twisted mind, that's a property dispute. It buys time. It bought me a lot more than time, she murmured. It bought me a way out. They arrived at a small, run-down apartment complex in Astoria. It was a far cry from the Upper East Side. The brick was crumbling, and the streetlights flickered. I have to get Leo, Caleb said, parking the truck. You can wait here. No, she said. I'm coming. They walked up 3 flights of stairs. Caleb knocked on door 3B. An elderly woman opened it, looking disgruntled. You're late, Caleb. Sorry, Mrs. Higgins. Traffic. Gala traffic. A small boy with messy brown hair and thick glasses rocketed out from behind the woman's legs. Daddy! Caleb dropped to one knee, ignoring his tuxedo, and caught the boy. The transformation was instant. The hard, dangerous man from the ballroom melted. He buried his face in the boy's neck. Hey, buddy, you be good? I built a tower. Mrs. Higgins said it was too loud when it fell. Caleb stood up, lifting the boy effortlessly. He handed the woman a wad of crumpled cash. Then he turned to Serafina. Leo's eyes went wide behind his glasses. He pointed a sticky finger at her. Daddy, is that a princess? Serafina looked down at her $10,000 Dior gown, now slightly stained with city grit. She looked at Caleb, who was watching her with a guarded expression. No, Leo, Serafina said, a small smile touching her lips. I'm just a girl who got lost. Inside Caleb's apartment, it was small but obsessively tidy. There were architectural sketches pinned to the walls, not just carpentry, but complex, beautiful designs for skyscrapers and parks. After Leo was tucked into bed in the small bedroom, Caleb came out to the living room where Serafina was sitting on a worn plaid sofa. He handed her a mug of tea. It's not champagne, he said. Thank God, she replied. She took a sip. "Caleb, I have a proposition for you." Caleb leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "I'm not taking money from you, Serafina. You need money. I saw you count that cash for the babysitter. You were short, weren't you?" She gave you a look. Caleb's jaw tightened. "We do fine. I need to stay away from my father and Preston until I turn 29. That's in 3 months. If I'm unmarried at 29, my grandmother's trust fund unlocks directly to me, bypassing my father. If I marry before then, or if I buckle under the pressure, he controls it." Caleb listened, his eyes narrowing. "My father will destroy you for tonight," she continued. "He'll make sure you never work construction in this state again. You said he ruined you before? Well, he'll finish the job now. Get to the point. We keep the lie going. You be my fake boyfriend. We live together. We make it look real. In exchange, when I get my trust fund, I give you $5 million. And I'll pay for whatever Leo needs, schooling, healthcare, everything." Caleb laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "You want me to play house with a billionaire in a queen's walk-up? You wouldn't last a day, princess. You don't know how to boil water. I'll learn. And I'm not asking you to play house. I'm asking you to help me survive." She stood up, meeting his gaze. "You hate my father. I can see it. Help me beat him." Caleb looked at the door to Leo's room, then back at Serafina. He walked over to a desk and picked up a letter, a final notice for medical bills. He crumpled it in his hand. He turned to her, his dark eyes burning with a sudden, intense resolve. 3 months, he said, "but my rules. You live here, you live like us. No servants, no complaining. And if danger comes, and it will, you do exactly what I say." "Deal," she whispered. Caleb stepped closer. The tension in the small room spiked, thick and electric. "And one more thing," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "If we do this, you have to sell it. Preston isn't stupid. If he sees us, he has to believe I'm crazy about you, and that you're crazy about me." "I can act," she said. "Good," Caleb said. "Because Arthur Wellington isn't just a businessman, Serafina. He's a shark, and you just invited him into the water." He extended his hand again. This time it wasn't a rescue, it was a pact. As she shook it, Serafina didn't realize that Caleb wasn't just a carpenter down on his luck. She didn't see the file hidden in his desk drawer, labeled Project Wellington, Evidence. She had just hired the one man in New York who had been planning her father's downfall for 5 years. She thought she was using him. But Caleb Sterling was about to use her, too. The first thing Serafina realized about being poor was that it was loud. In her penthouse, the world was double-paned, soundproofed, and temperature-controlled. In Caleb's apartment in Astoria, the radiator hissed like a dying cat. The neighbors upstairs walked with lead boots, and the sirens outside were a constant, screaming lullaby. She woke up on the couch with a stiff neck and a blanket that smelled of laundry detergent and sawdust. For a moment, she forgot. She reached for the bell to summon her maid, Maria, for coffee. Her hand hit the rough fabric of the sofa cushion. Reality crashed back in, disowned, engaged to a carpenter. "Queens, you're awake," a small voice said. Serafina sat up. Leo was standing there, holding a plastic bowl of cereal. He was wearing mismatched socks and staring at her with intense curiosity. "Good morning, Leo," she croaked. Her hair was a bird's nest. Her makeup from the gala was smeared under her eyes. "Daddy said not to wake you because you're a fragile flower," Leo reported faithfully. "Did he now?" Serafina narrowed her eyes. Caleb walked out of the kitchen. He was shirtless, drying his hair with a towel. Serafina's breath hitched in her throat. The tuxedo hadn't done him justice. He was a landscape of hard muscle and old scars. There was a jagged white line running down his ribs, a construction injury, she assumed, or a knife fight. At this point, she wouldn't be surprised. I said delicate flower, Caleb corrected, tossing the towel onto a chair. He threw a t-shirt on, hiding the view. Coffee's in the pot. It's Folgers. Don't ask for oat milk, we don't have it. I can drink black coffee, Serafina lied. She stood up, realizing she was still in her ruined ball gown. I need clothes. I grabbed some stuff from the lost and found bin at the laundromat, downstairs, Caleb said, pointing to a plastic bag. Jeans. A hoodie. It's not Gucci, but it's clean. Serafina looked at the bag. Then she looked at Caleb. You're enjoying this. Watching the Princess of Park Avenue wear a hoodie that says Queen's Plumbing Supply? Yeah, a little bit. An hour later, Serafina Wellington, fashion icon, was wearing oversized jeans belted with a piece of rope she found in a drawer, and a grey hoodie that swallowed her frame. She looked in the cracked bathroom mirror. She looked ridiculous. She looked invisible. We have to go, Caleb yelled from the door. I have a job site in Brooklyn. I'm dropping Leo at school. Then you're coming with me. To a construction site. You're my girlfriend, remember? We're inseparable. Plus, if I leave you here, you'll probably try to use the toaster and burn the building down. The drive to the school was quiet, but when they pulled up to the curb, reality shifted again. As Caleb leaned over to unbuckle Leo, a flash went off. Then another. Serafina gasped, shrinking down in the seat. They found us. Paparazzi. 3 of them, lurking near the school gates. They must have tracked the truck's license plate from the blurry photos at the plaza. Stay down, Caleb growled. No, Serafina said, a sudden steely resolve entering her voice. She sat up straight. If we hide, we look guilty. If we hide, Preston wins. We have to sell it, Caleb. You said it yourself. Caleb looked at her, surprised by her tone. You want to walk out there? I want to walk out there and make my father have a heart attack over his morning espresso. Caleb smirked. It was a dangerous, jagged smile. All right then. Let's give them a show. He opened the door. He got out, walked around the truck, and opened her door. He didn't just offer a hand. He grabbed her waist, pulling her flush against him. The cameras went wild. Click, 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 click. Smile, Caleb whispered in her ear. Like I just told you the funniest joke in the world. Serafina laughed, a bright, fake, beautiful sound. She grabbed Caleb's bicep. They walked Leo to the gate. Caleb kissed the top of Leo's head. Be good, buddy. Bye, Dad. Bye, Princess, Leo yelled. As they turned back to the truck, a reporter shoved a microphone in Caleb's face. Mr. Sterling, is it true you kidnapped Serafina Wellington? Mr. Wellington says you're a dangerous criminal. Caleb stopped. He looked directly into the camera lens. He wrapped an arm possessively around Serafina's shoulders, his hand heavy and warm. Kidnapped? Caleb chuckled darkly. Does she look kidnapped to you? He looked down at Serafina. His eyes dropped to her lips. Don't do it, she thought. Don't. Caleb didn't listen to her thoughts. He leaned in and kissed her. It was supposed to be for the cameras. It was supposed to be a stage kiss. But the moment his lips touched hers, something snapped. It wasn't gentle. It was rough, hungry, and tasting of cheap coffee and defiance. It was a kiss that claimed her. Serafina's knees went weak. She found her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer, forgetting the cameras, forgetting the contract. When they broke apart, breathless, the silence was deafening. Even the paparazzi seemed stunned. She's with me, Caleb repeated, his voice husky. He shoved her into the truck and peeled away, leaving the press in a cloud of exhaust. Inside the cab, the silence was thick. Serafina touched her lips. They were tingling. "That was," she started. "Necessary." Caleb cut her off, his knuckles white on the wheel. He wouldn't look at her. "That was just business, Serafina. Don't read into it." But Serafina saw the way his jaw flexed, the vein pulsing in his neck. It might have been business, but her heart was pounding a rhythm that felt dangerously like trouble. The job site was a renovation of an old brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. It was dusty, loud, and physically grueling. Caleb didn't let Serafina sit in the truck. He handed her a broom. "If you're here, you work," he said. "Sweep the second floor." "I don't sweep," she protested. "You do now. Consider it rent." For 3 hours, Serafina Wellington swept sawdust. She coughed. She sweated. She broke a fingernail. But strangely, as the pile of dust grew, she felt a sense of satisfaction she had never felt, closing $1 million merger. This was tangible. Around noon, Caleb called a break. They sat on the unfinished floor, eating sandwiches he had packed, bologna and cheese. "So," Serafina said, picking at the bread, "you're not just a carpenter, are you?" Caleb paused mid-chew. "What makes you say that?" "I saw the sketches in your apartment, the skyscrapers, the bridge designs. They're incredible, Caleb. They're professional. You're an architect." Caleb set his sandwich down. The air temperature seemed to drop. "I was an architect." "What happened?" He looked out the window at the skyline of Manhattan. "I worked for a firm, big one. We were designing a low-income housing project in the Bronx. Safe, affordable, beautiful. It was my dream project." He took a sip of water, his eyes distant. "Your father's company, Wellington Group, was the developer. They cut corners. They used subpar concrete, cheap steel. I tried to whistle-blow. I went to the city. I went to the papers." Serafina felt a cold dread in her stomach. "And Arthur Wellington crushed me. He paid off the inspectors. He planted drugs in my desk. He sued me for breach of contract and defamation. I lost my license. I lost my reputation. I couldn't get hired to build a doghouse in this city." He turned to her, his eyes blazing with old fury. "But that wasn't the worst part. The stress, it broke my family. My wife, Sarah. She was pregnant with Leo at the time. The legal battles drained our savings. We lost our insurance. When she had complications, he didn't finish. He didn't have to." "I'm so sorry," Serafina whispered. She reached out to touch his hand, but he pulled away. "She died because we couldn't afford the specialist she needed," Caleb said flatly. "Because your father bankrupted us to silence me. So don't look at me with those big, pitying eyes, Serafina. I'm helping you because I need the money to give Leo a future. But don't mistake this for friendship. Your last name is the reason my wife is in the ground." The revelation hung between them like a guillotine blade. Serafina felt sick. She knew her father was ruthless. She knew he was cold. But a murderer. "I'm not him," she said, her voice shaking. "Aren't you?" Caleb stood up, dusting off his pants. "You've lived off the blood money your whole life. You're wearing it right now. Even that hoodie. You're only wearing it because you're playing a game. I'm trying to escape him. Are you? Or are you just throwing a tantrum until he gives you a better deal?" Before she could scream at him, Caleb's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his face changed. The anger vanished, replaced by a sharp, tactical alertness. "Stay here," he ordered. "Who is it?" "Trouble." He walked downstairs. Serafina waited 10 seconds, then crept to the stairwell to listen. She heard Caleb's voice, low and threatening. I told you not to come here. Then a voice she recognized. Smooth, oily, Preston Calloway. I'm just checking on my fiancé, Caleb, Preston sneered. Arthur is very worried. He thinks you've brainwashed her. He's offering you a deal, $1 million. Cash, right now. Just put her in my car. Serafina held her breath. $1 million. That was life-changing for Caleb. He could pay his debts. He could move Leo to a house with a yard. There was a long silence. 1 million, Caleb repeated. Think about the boy, Preston pressed. I know about your financial struggles. I know about the debt collectors. Be smart, Sterling. You're a bottom feeder. Don't try to swim with sharks. Serafina closed her eyes. He's going to do it. He hates me anyway. You're right, Caleb said. I am a bottom feeder. A pause. Then the sound of a fist hitting flesh, wet and hard. A grunt of pain, the sound of a body hitting the floor. But down here, Caleb's voice snarled. We eat garbage like you. Get out of my sight, Preston, before I bury you in the concrete foundation. Scuffling sounds, footsteps running away, a car door slamming. Serafina let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. He hadn't sold her out. When Caleb came back upstairs, he was nursing bruised knuckles. He saw Serafina standing at the top of the stairs. He knew she had heard. You didn't take the money, she said softly. I'm expensive, he muttered, walking past her to pick up his tools. Thank you. He stopped. He looked at her, and the wall between them thinned, just a fraction. We have a contract, Serafina. I don't break contracts, unlike your father. Later that night, back at the apartment, the atmosphere had shifted. The hostility was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Mutual respect? Or perhaps mutual danger. Serafina was on the floor, helping Leo build a Lego castle. Caleb was at his desk, working on the Project Wellington file, though Serafina didn't know that yet. Princess, Leo asked. You can call me Sarah, Leo. Sarah. Do you have a mummy? Serafina froze. No, my mother died when I was very little, just like yours. Leo nodded solemnly. Did she go to the stars? I think so. My dad says my mum is the North Star. He says as long as we can see it, we're never lost. Serafina looked up at Caleb's back. His shoulders were tense. He was listening. Your dad is a smart man, she said. Leo leaned in, whispering. Dad is sad. He thinks I don't know, but I hear him talking to the pictures at night. Serafina's heart broke. She looked around the small living room. She saw a locked drawer in Caleb's desk, the one he never opened. That night, after Caleb had gone to sleep on the armchair, giving her the couch again, Serafina couldn't sleep. The apartment was cold. She got up to get a glass of water. As she passed the desk, she noticed something. In his exhaustion, Caleb had left the key in the locked drawer. She knew she shouldn't. It was an invasion of privacy. But Caleb had admitted to hating her family. He had admitted to a vendetta. She needed to know how deep this went. Was she safe with him? She turned the key. The drawer slid open silently. Inside, there was a thick manila folder labeled Project Wellington. She opened it. It wasn't just legal papers about his unfair dismissal. It was a dossier. Photos of her father. Photos of Preston. Bank transfer records. Blueprints of Wellington buildings with red circles marking structural weaknesses. But at the bottom of the stack, there was a photograph that made her blood run cold. It was a picture of a younger Arthur Wellington, arguing with a man on a construction site, and standing in the background, looking terrified, was a teenage girl. Serafina brought the photo closer to her face. The girl was her. She was 16 in the photo, She remembered that day. Her father had taken her to a site visit. He had told her to wait in the car, but she had gotten out. She had seen him arguing with a foreman. She looked at the date on the back of the photo. August 12th, 2018. The day the scaffolding collapsed at the West Side project. The day 3 workers died. Her father had testified he was never at the site that day. He claimed negligence by the subcontractors, but this photo proved he was there. It proved he knew about the danger. And the man he was arguing with in the photo? It was Caleb. Serafina gasped, dropping the photo. Caleb hadn't just been a victim. He had been the one warning Arthur, and Arthur had ignored him. "Find something interesting." The voice came from the darkness behind her. Serafina spun around. Caleb was standing in the shadows of the hallway. He wasn't wearing a shirt. His scars looked like silver rivers in the moonlight. He held a baseball bat loosely in one hand, force of habit in this neighborhood. He didn't look angry. He looked resigned. "You were there," Serafina whispered, trembling. "You tried to stop him." "I tried." Caleb walked into the light. "And because I failed, 3 men died, and then my wife died." He stopped inches from her. He reached out and took the photo from her shaking hand. "You're the missing piece, Serafina," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You were there. You're the witness that can put your father in prison for manslaughter." Serafina backed up against the desk. "Is that why you saved me? Is that why you brought me here? To use me as a witness?" Caleb looked at her. His eyes were dark, unreadable pools. "I brought you here because you needed help," he said. "But now you have a choice. You can take your trust fund and run to Europe, or you can help me burn his empire to the ground." He leaned in, his hand bracing against the desk on either side of her, trapping her. "So, Princess, whose side are you really on?" The air in the apartment didn't feel like Queen's anymore. It felt like the inside of a bomb shelter. Serafina didn't flinch as Caleb pinned her against the desk, his question hanging in the air. "Whose side are you really on?" She reached up, her fingers trembling slightly, and placed her hand over his heart. It was beating hard, a rhythmic thud against her palm that betrayed his calm exterior. "I'm on the side of the truth," she whispered. "I saw him, Caleb. I remember that day. I was sitting in the back of the Bentley playing on my phone, and I saw him pointing at the support beams. I saw you shouting. I didn't know what it meant then. I do now." Caleb searched her face, looking for the lie. He didn't find one. The tension in his shoulders broke. He exhaled, a long, shuddering breath, and rested his forehead against hers. "If we do this," he murmured, his voice rough with exhaustion, "there is no going back. He will try to destroy everything I have left. He will come for Leo." "Let him come," Serafina said, surprising herself with the ferocity in her voice. "He's never fought a Wellington who knows his playbook." For the next 2 weeks, the tiny apartment in Astoria became a war room. Serafina, the woman who had never boiled an egg, learned to live small. She sold her diamond earrings at a pawn shop on Steinway Street for cash, pennies on the dollar, but enough to buy groceries and burner phones. She spent her days organizing Caleb's chaotic files, using her business degree to connect the dots of money laundering that Caleb had missed. She also learned about Caleb. She learned that he hummed jazz while he shaved. She learned that he had nightmares where he called out his dead wife's name, and she would have to wake him up, soothing him until the panic subsided. And the romance? It wasn't flowers and dates. It was quiet. It was Caleb bringing her a pair of wool socks because the floor was cold. It was Serafina reading to Leo on the floor until both of them fell asleep, and Caleb carrying her to the bed, tucking her in with a gentleness that made her chest ache. They were playing house, but the walls were closing in. The attack came on a Tuesday. It wasn't a hitman. Arthur Wellington was too smart for that. He used the deadliest weapon in his arsenal, the bureaucracy. There was a knock on the door at 7:00 p.m. Caleb was in the kitchen making spaghetti. Leo was drawing at the table. Caleb opened the door to find 2 police officers and a woman in a grey suit holding a clipboard. "Caleb Sterling?" the woman asked. Her voice was devoid of emotion. "I'm Janice Rourke from Child Protective Services." Caleb went still. "What is this?" "We received an anonymous tip regarding the welfare of a minor, Leo Sterling. Reports of drug use in the home, unstable living conditions, and the presence of a fugitive." She glanced over Caleb's shoulder at Serafina. "That's a lie," Caleb said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet register. "This is harassment." "We have a court order, Mr. Sterling. We need to inspect the premises and, pending the investigation, place the child in temporary protective custody." "Over my dead body," Caleb snarled. He stepped forward, blocking the doorway. The police officers reached for their belts. "Caleb, stop!" Serafina rushed forward, grabbing his arm. She knew this game. If he resisted, he would be arrested, and Leo would be gone forever. "Don't give them a reason," she turned to the social worker. "Ms. Rourke, I am Serafina Wellington. I am staying here of my own free will. There are no drugs. This home is safe." The woman looked at Serafina with a sneer. "Miss Wellington, your father has filed a report stating you are being held under duress and are suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. His statement is part of the file. Now, step aside." Caleb was vibrating with rage. Serafina squeezed his arm hard. "Trust me," her eyes pleaded. "You can inspect the apartment," Serafina said calmly, "but you cannot take the boy. Check the order, Ms. Rourke. Unless you find immediate physical danger, you cannot remove a child without a hearing. I know the law. Section 1024 of the Family Court Act." The social worker paused. She hadn't expected the heiress to know the poverty law statutes. She checked her clipboard, frowning. "Fine, we inspect. But if I find one thing out of place..." They tore the apartment apart. They looked in the cupboards, under the beds, in the trash. Leo sat on the sofa, clutching his plastic dinosaur, terrified. Caleb stood in the center of the room, his eyes tracking their every move like a predator waiting to pounce. They found nothing, because Serafina had cleaned that apartment like her life depended on it. "This isn't over," Ms. Rourke said as she headed for the door. "We have a hearing scheduled for Friday at 9:00 a.m. If you don't show, we take the boy." When the door clicked shut, Caleb collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. He was shaking. "They're going to take him," he whispered. "Arthur owns the judges. He owns the system. I can't win this." Serafina looked at the man she was falling in love with. He was broken. The system was designed to crush men like him. She walked over and knelt between his legs. She pulled his hands away from his face. "He wants you to break," she said fiercely. "He wants you to run." "But we aren't running. We have no money for a lawyer, Serafina. We have nothing. We have the truth," she said. "And we have an audience." She stood up, her eyes hard. "The Wellington Centennial Gala is tomorrow night. Every major shareholder, news outlet, and prosecutor in the state will be there. My father thinks he's crowning himself King of New York." Caleb looked up. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we don't need a lawyer," Serafina said. "We need a microphone. We're going to that gala, Caleb, and we're going to burn it down." The Wellington Centennial Gala was the event of the decade. The Metropolitan Museum of Art had been rented out. The red carpet was swarming with more paparazzi than the Oscars. Arthur Wellington stood at the top of the stairs, tuxedo impeccable, shaking hands. Preston Calloway stood beside him, looking smug. They had won. Caleb was buried in legal trouble. Serafina was effectively silenced by the mental instability narrative they had planted in the press. "She'll come crawling back when the money runs out," Arthur was saying to Preston. "Give it a week." "I hope so," Preston laughed. "I still need that merger." Inside the great hall, the dinner was beginning. Waiters circulated with caviar. A live orchestra played Mozart. At the service entrance in the back, a delivery van pulled up. Caleb jumped out. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo this time. He was wearing a dark charcoal suit, fitted, sharp, and bought from a thrift store, tailored by Mrs. Higgins upstairs. He looked lethal. He opened the back doors. Serafina stepped out. She wasn't wearing Dior. She was wearing a vintage black velvet dress she'd found at a consignment shop for $40. It was simple, backless, and dramatic. With her hair slicked back and her lips painted a deep crimson, she looked like an avenging angel. "Ready?" Caleb asked. He held out his hand. "Scared," she admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He laced his fingers through hers. "Just remember, you're Serafina Wellington. You own this room. I'm just the guy holding your purse." She laughed, a nervous, breathless sound. "You're the guy holding my heart, Caleb. Don't sell yourself short." He stopped. He looked at her, stunned by the admission. "Tell me that again when we're not about to commit social suicide," he said, his eyes intense. They bypassed security. Caleb knew the layout of the Met. He had studied the blueprints years ago for a renovation bid. They slipped through the kitchen, past the confused chefs, and found the freight elevator to the main stage wings. On stage, Arthur Wellington was tapping a glass. The room went silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur began, his voice booming, "thank you for celebrating 100 years of excellence. Tonight we look to the future, a future where Wellington Group continues to build the skyline of this great city." "He's lying!" The voice rang out, amplified and clear. The crowd gasped. Heads turned. Serafina walked out from behind the curtain. She didn't have a microphone, but she didn't need one. She had the Wellington projection voice. Arthur froze. His face went pale. "Serafina, get off the stage. You're not well." "I've never been better, Father," she said, walking to the center of the podium. Caleb followed her, standing just behind her right shoulder, a silent, looming sentinel. Preston rushed the stage from the side. "Security! Get them out of here!" Caleb stepped forward. He didn't throw a punch. He just stood in Preston's path and stared him down. "Touch her," Caleb said calmly, "and you'll be eating through a straw for the rest of your life." Preston halted, terrified. Serafina grabbed the microphone from the podium. "My father talks about building the skyline," she said, her voice trembling slightly but gaining strength. "But he doesn't tell you what he buries in the foundation." "Cut the mic!" Arthur screamed at the sound booth, but the sound guy didn't move. Why? Because earlier that day, Caleb had called in a favor from an old union buddy who ran the audio for the Met. The union remembered the 3 men who died. They hadn't forgotten. 5 years ago, Serafina continued, the room deathly silent. 3 men died at the West Side project. My father claimed he wasn't there. He claimed he didn't know the steel was subpar. She reached into Caleb's jacket pocket and pulled out the photo. She held it up. It was too small for the crowd to see, but the cameras zoomed in. The image was projected onto the giant screens behind her. The screens meant for Arthur's tribute video. There it was. Arthur Wellington, on site. August 12th, arguing with Caleb. A collective gasp ripped through the room. "This is Caleb Sterling," Serafina said, gesturing to him. "The architect who tried to stop him. The man my father framed. The man whose wife died because my father bankrupted them to keep this secret. Arthur looked like a trapped animal. He grabbed a glass of water and threw it, shattering it near Serafina's feet. She's lying. It's Photoshop. She's mentally unstable. That man is a kidnapper. I am a witness, Serafina screamed back, her composure cracking into raw emotion. I was there, Dad. I was in the car. I saw you. She turned to the crowd, tears streaming down her face. I am Serafina Wellington, and I am relinquishing my trust fund, my shares, and my name, because I will not build a life on blood. She turned to Caleb. He was looking at her with such awe, such raw love, that the rest of the room melted away. I choose him, she said into the mic. I choose the carpenter. For 3 seconds there was silence. Then a slow clap started. It wasn't a guest, it was the police commissioner, sitting in the front row. He stood up. He looked at Arthur Wellington with a cold, hard stare. He signaled to his officers. Arthur Wellington, the commissioner said, his voice carrying over the room. I think we need to have a conversation downtown. Pandemonium erupted. Reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs blinded them. Arthur was surrounded by police. Preston was trying to sneak out the back exit, only to be tripped by a waiter who had been listening. In the center of the storm, Caleb grabbed Serafina's waist. You did it! He shouted over the noise. We did it! She cried, adrenaline crashing through her. He pulled her in. This time, there were no paparazzi cameras they were trying to fool. There was no contract. He kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of victory and freedom. It was a kiss that promised a future, messy, poor, loud, and absolutely real. Let's go home, Caleb said against her lips. To the penthouse? She teased, breathless. To Queens, he smiled. Mrs. Higgins is making pot roast. 1 year later. The Bronx didn't look like the Plaza Hotel. The sidewalk was cracked. The air smelled of hot pretzels and car exhaust, and the noise was a constant, rhythmic thrum. But to Serafina, it was the most beautiful place on earth. She stood in front of a newly renovated brick building. Above the entrance, a modest sign read, The Sterling and Wellington Community Housing Project. Serafina wasn't wearing a gown. She was wearing tailored slacks, comfortable boots, and a blazer that meant business. She held a clipboard, checking off the catering list for the opening ceremony. You missed a spot, a voice rumbled behind her. She smiled without turning around. I never miss anything, Mr. Sterling. That's why you hired me as your CFO. Caleb wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. He smelled of cedar and that expensive cologne she had bought him for his birthday, a small luxury in their new, chaotic life. Technically, I hired you because you're the only person who can read my handwriting, Caleb teased. That too. A lot had changed in 12 months. Arthur Wellington was currently serving the first year of a 15-year sentence for manslaughter, fraud, and bribery. The trial had been the media circus of the century. Serafina had testified against him, staring her father in the eye as she dismantled his empire piece by piece. The Wellington Group stock had plummeted, then been bought out by an ethical board of directors who immediately settled with the families of the victims. Serafina didn't take a dime of the settlement. She didn't take her trust fund either. She walked away with nothing but her education and her name, which she was in the process of changing. Are you nervous? Serafina asked, turning in his arms. Caleb looked up at the building. It was the design he had been working on the night they met, the one that Arthur had killed to suppress. It was safe, it was affordable, and it was full of families who finally had a home. No, Caleb said. I'm not nervous. I'm just thankful. Daddy! Daddy! Leo came sprinting out of the building, wearing a miniature suit and a tie that was crooked. He was 7 now, taller, and missing a front tooth. "Mrs. Higgins is eating all the cookies," Leo tattled, pointing inside. "That woman is a menace," Caleb laughed. "Go guard the table, Leo. I'll be there in a second." Leo saluted and ran back inside. Caleb turned back to Serafina. His expression grew serious. He reached into his pocket. "I don't have a 10-carat diamond," he said softly. "I don't have a summer house in the Hamptons, and I definitely don't have a private jet." "I hate flying anyway," Serafina whispered, her heart starting to race. Caleb pulled out a ring. It wasn't gold. It was a band of polished titanium inlaid with a strip of dark walnut wood. It was strong, unique, and unbreakable. "I made this in the shop last night," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Serafina, you saved my life. You saved my son. You walked into the fire for us. I can't promise you a life of ease. But I can promise you that no matter what comes, flood, fire, or bankruptcy, you will never stand alone again." He dropped to one knee on the sidewalk of the Bronx. "Serafina, will you marry me?" Serafina looked at the man who had once been just a shadow in a ballroom. She looked at the building they had built together. She thought about the tiny apartment where they still lived, the noisy radiator, the laughter, the love that filled every crack in the walls. She realized she was richer now than she had ever been as a billionaire. "Yes," she choked out. "Yes, Caleb. 1,000 times." He stood up and kissed her, lifting her off her feet as the people inside the community center saw them and started to cheer. As he set her down, a photographer from the New York Times, there to cover the opening, snapped a picture. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Wellington," the photographer called out. "Can we get a caption for the front page? Is she officially with the firm?" Caleb looked at the camera, then down at Serafina, his eyes shining with triumph. "The firm?" Caleb smiled, pulling her close. "No. Better." He kissed her forehead. "She's with me." And that is the story of Serafina and Caleb. It's a reminder that sometimes the things we are most afraid of losing, status, money, comfort, are the very things keeping us trapped. Serafina thought she was a princess who needed saving, but she turned out to be a warrior who saved herself. And Caleb? He proved that a man's worth isn't measured by the size of his wallet, but by the strength of his character and the lengths he will go to protect the people he loves. True love isn't about finding someone who fits your life perfectly. It's about finding someone who is willing to build a new life with you, brick by brick. What did you think of Serafina's choice? Would you have given up billions of dollars for love and the truth? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another story of love, betrayal, and redemption. Share this with someone who needs to believe in happy endings. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.